For those of you who've joined us this evening, hello and thank you for coming to one of our PNCA Alumni Connection events. My name is Tiffany Newton and I lead the Alumni and Parent Engagement team here at PNCA in Willamette. This evening's conversation will feature Alejandra Arias Sevilla and Melanie Stevens. Alejandra is an interdisciplinary artist and printmaker based in Portland, Oregon. She investigates semantics, familiar spaces, and personal history to reflect and analyze the language that knits her selfhood. These are rooted in the storytelling of her grandmothers and her childhood in Mexico. Her work has been shown with Nat Turner Project, Small Axe Gallery, Converge 45. She earned her BFA at PNCA. She is also the 2021 awardee of the Undergrowth Educational Print Fund at Melanie Printing and the 2020-2021 Stello Letterpress Residency. We're also joined by Professor Stevens, who's an artist, illustrator, and writer. She's the creator of the graphic novel series Watershed and the co-founder and editor of Miss Anthology, an organization that supports and publishes racially and economically diverse young comic artists who identify as female or genderqueer. She's also the co-curator of the Nat Turner Project, a migratory gallery space that grants artists of color the freedom to create or express their own language within and without the parameters of racial commodification and designation. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree for political science from Yale University and her Master of Fine Arts degree for visual studies at PNCA as well, where she currently teaches. Thank you both for joining us this evening. We're so excited to have you and hear your conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I will hand it off to Professor Stevens.
Thank you, Tiffany. So Alejandra, thank you for joining us and agreeing to chat with me for a little bit about your life and work and your practice. I guess in full transparency, we should state that we do know each other quite well.
Yes.
We've met over 4 years ago as co-workers of the community education program. And since then, I've known you in so many different capacities. I've known you as a colleague, a professional colleague and a co-worker. I've known you as a collaborator in different art projects that we've both been in. I've curated your work as part of Nat Turner Project. And I mean, I've been your pupil. You've taught me letterpress as well. And I've also just been like a general appreciator of your work and your art. And I feel like in all of these capacities that I've known you across the board, one of the things that I think is most notable is your extreme rigor and your impeccable work ethic, as well as the care and the attention to detail that you utilize and exercise throughout your work. And I guess the first question I have, and a question I've had for a very long time and have just never really asked you, is like, what informs this? Because I believe that your work ethic is reflective of someone with of decades of experience, and I'm always impressed. So yeah, what informs that for you?
Well, thank you. I feel very honored to be interviewed by someone who we've known each other for so many years and have worn different hats together, and I admire you as a colleague and a friend. So I'm excited for this conversation. And to answer your question, I was thinking about it and I'm not sure. I remember being a very observant child, mostly because I was introverted and I felt safer kind of viewing the world through like a glass window in some sort of sense. And I feel like a lot of my drive comes from curiosity or wonderment and reflection, and having the ability to just like immerse in something. It's definitely a challenge sometimes to be present, but something about printmaking, for example, you need your body to be present, you need your mind to be present, and I think it has been a vehicle for that, for a catharsis to be present and have the ability to be so diligent about details and attention to everything that you're doing. So I think I would say like printmaking has been a huge driver into being able to do just being present, which I think leads to having that rigor.
Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned printmaking. You're obviously, your practice is immersed in that particular medium in a very specific kind of way. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I guess my initial question regarding your printmaking practice is, what about printmaking do you find the most fascinating and interesting?
I feel like for a little bit of backstory, towards the end of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to study, and I took a course at community education in the youth program at PNCA, and I was very curious about printmaking. And it's something about it clicked, having the smells of ink, the smells of paper, and a lot of that has to do with the connection I had with my granddad, who was in the publishing business in Mexico City, and just visiting the shop and like smelling the ink, smelling the paper, and I immediately connected through that. And it has been just sort of like, mostly I just felt like a child with like all these new toys in some sort of sense, going into the studio at PNCA and focusing in print and being like, what's that? Like, how does that machine work? And what does it do? Like looking at a Vandercook or looking at the litho studio, kind of scared, and being like, I should probably take a class of litho and figure out what that is. And I feel like a lot of it has been just like the tactility of it and the catharsis that I get through printing. That has been really, really enjoyable and more rewarding than other processes that I've tried out, like painting or drawing. I think print, it just somehow clicks. I have a hard time describing that, but I think catharsis has been the best word for me to explain it.
Yeah. I think one thing that most printmakers can agree on is that interwoven within the practice is a really strong sense of community. And I've seen you throughout your career at PNCA and within the BFA program, sort of utilizing that communal aspect, particularly with the Dia de los Muertos programming that you were involved in. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that started, and just some notable like events that happened within that for you?
Yeah, I think, having a shared space can lead to building interpersonal relationships, such as a print shop. And a lot of it, I was just spending a lot of my time in the print shop, even though my major is not printmaking, my major is intermedia. I took a lot of the printmaking classes and felt really comfortable and invited in that space. So I naturally spent a lot of time there. And I was in the space when they were having Megan Gilligan and Matthew Letzesser had a meeting trying to organize Day of the Dead. And I just kind of popped in because I heard some Spanish speakers in the room, who was muralist Hector Hernandez, who's also a professor at PSU, and Maria Garcia, who is the owner of Revolucion Coffee. And I just kind of tuned in, introduced myself, and they kind of invited me to be a part of the conversation in organizing a Dia de los Muertos event at PNCA. And it just felt nice to talk to them, kind of see them as mentors and just other people from Mexico City who are in Portland. And I think the most notable aspect of that was the printing events that led to the Day of the Dead. So sometimes during lunchtime, with a lot of the MFA print media folks, we would set up screens just to pull some butterflies to be able to arrange the space, and we'd paste on the wall. And that was really nice, just to be able to get, have people interact with screen printing who have not had that experience before or have been intimidated by the studio, and the kind of conversations that came about either on screen printing in general, or Day of the Dead, or what are you doing, or what's happening here, that questions that you often get by bypassers. I think the most notable thing that I can remember from those events were the sense of community in some regard of the people who came through. I was part of 2 events, or I think 3 Day of the Dead events, if I'm not my memory is failing me, might be 2, I'm not sure. And one of them was a PNCA, and the next one was a PNCA and at the Portland Art Museum, which felt like a huge accomplishment. And also it felt a little odd because for that year, it felt like we just wanted to prove that this was a very important cultural event and that people will show up. And people showed up. There was school buses outside of the Portland Art Museum, many folks from the community who were just excited to feel at home and have these cultural events and with other people, and share food, which is very important to us. And in one of those events, there was another show happening at PNCA. There was a student show who brought up 2 doors that were used when that building was used as an immigration center. And the conversations that were happening were, I would say, were not appropriate, and how those conversations were held were really like dangerous, and they were not being respectful, which was, kind of, it threw us off having that monument of pain and borders versus having this cultural event happen alongside it. So I think a week or 2 afterwards, those doors were still up in the historic hallway, and you could see them towards the end. Every time you enter the building, you could see them towards the end of the historic hallway. And so I had some conversations with people, and in like a more reactionary way, I just like threw on a flag that I actually found in the basement of PNCA by working at Community Education, which is where all the materials are for the program. I found that flag, and it felt I just needed to react to the doors and the monuments and how inappropriate they were being used. And there was no written component to the doors at all. There was nothing written. So I just threw it on, and it felt like the conversation advanced to something else, like talking about nation states and borders, and also how the PNCA as an institution hadn't and has not told the history of the building itself, even as an educational institution now, and how upsetting that has been to many students, that hasn't even been like said up front. So there was a shift in conversation after the flag was hung over the doors. And I think that was one of the things I remember the most from the Day of the Dead events.
Yeah, I remember that incident. It was in 2018, right?
I think so.
Yes. And one of the things that I teach in one of my classes, Art in Context, is that as artists, we automatically sort of reflect the times that we live in, right? And that moment, I think, with the doors and the conversations that happened around it, as well as your performance of draping the flag over it, was very much something born of the time in which that piece was made. And I wonder I appreciated the generative conversations that came of that, as the community of PNCA sort of addressed some of the things that it hadn't previously addressed. But I also wonder, as an artist, do you feel obligated to sort of create these situations for conversation in your work?
That's interesting. I guess in some regard, yes. I think I have done or had the intention to do that with letterpress, and especially within, a container like a book. Um, in my in the class I took, the letterpress class with Rory Sparks, my last project was kind of inviting a reflection on the labels used to identify people from Latin America, both documented in dictionaries and simultaneously looking at the vocabulary used in online spheres like Twitter, interviews, things like that, that have not been documented or valued or addressed in a dictionary. And just inviting people to read about it and have this book be their dictionary and add to it. So there was a component, you had the book itself as a proper dictionary, and then a pamphlet alongside this book that you could add a label, a description, a meaning to this word, just to have a conversation in reflection of these vocabularies, because labels matter and they're important, but they're also very limiting at the same time. You cannot encompass nuance and complexity within one word or three word or phrases. So it was inviting a reflection to that. And I think I've done it in several other pieces. I feel like through the container of like a book or a publication, not so much as a performance or an act. I think that particular instance with the Doors felt like somewhat of a reactionary performance to just move on the conversation or just point it out a little bit towards a different direction or have people address it differently.
What is it about the book or the publication that you feel lends itself to this kind of critique or investigation of language?
I feel like, within the typographical languages like Spanish and English, books have been an object and container for pushing ideas forward or questioning them or even documenting them. A book may not be necessarily interacted with for many years, but those ideas still are within that book contained. And that's what kind of intrigues me, because they will live on beyond me. And a person can choose to interact with them. And if they do, it is sort of in a consensual way. They're opening up, they're choosing to look at it, they're choosing to read. And maybe when they're done, they close it down and they're ready for another thing or whatever it may be. But I feel like a lot of my connections with book have been this like closeness to it, this intimacy, this personal take that you have a conversation with a book and the reflection that you're doing while reading whatever the contents of it is. And I think that's why I'm so attracted to books and publishing, or in the realm of publishing and publications, and that relationship it has to its viewer or viewers, and what can come of it. And even though a book might not be interacted with, the contents are still there. So I think my relationship to books are that,
Yeah. Yes, I agree. I think that the work that I've seen of yours where you're like specifically sort of working with books and publications, the objects that you're making are very precious. There is an intimacy involved in them, which I think is rather lovely, actually. But I'm also thinking about your thesis work, Las frutas al deshelar el bordado, where you really kind of brought out your intermedia roots, where you combined like the processes themselves of letterpress and publication with stop animation and video. And I wanted to know a little bit more about that and how and why you decided to kind of lean more towards an interdisciplinary practice for the thesis work?
Yes, I think when I reached my final year at when I reached my final year at PNCA, I felt that I had a confident grasp in letterpress and in bookbinding, and it felt like I had been practicing or just working in letterpress for 2 or 3 years even, and it felt almost, I wouldn't say second nature, but it just felt natural, and it didn't feel like work. I just really, really enjoy doing it. And looking at how we experience language outside of a book, I was thinking of billboards, of, marketing materials that sometimes has typography. I was thinking of how we encounter these marketing materials outside of our realm, and looking at artists who have done that, like Alison Provax, who did a really wonderful public exhibition using billboard spaces and bus stops to show letterpress work, which I often saw as very intimate, very personal, very for one viewer. And it got me really thinking of how I can bring letterpress to more than just one viewer outside of the page. And also looking at how, typography can function within animation. So it sort of, I don't exactly remember how I landed on stop motion animation. I've been trying to remember, but I don't. It just kind of happened. I was, looking at how I can print with a Vandercook and print a lot. For some of these animations, there's 200 prints. And I was able to produce so much, and it kind of lent itself to stop motion animation, which I just took the time arts class my first year, and the tools that Carl Deal, the professor, gave me in that class was just enough to be able to create these stop motion animations using letterpress. And I felt like, I was asked, why don't you do this digitally? And honestly, the visual quality that letterpress gave to these videos are completely different. The way that people were engaging with them, or the way I was engaging with them, was so much more tender and like intimate than just having it digitally produced. And those were the qualities that I was looking for, having just like an intimate viewing with, or witnessing with the viewer, and have a conversation or like internal reflection with what I was writing about. And I feel really proud to have kind of jumped that bridge of using letterpress and also digital tools to kind of bring letterpress outside of like this intimate realm, and have multiple viewers experience it at the same time.
And speaking of your thesis work, you are a recent graduate. You graduated in 2020, which was an interesting time to graduate or to live, really. What was that like?
Oh my goodness. Going back to your first question of my rigor, I gotta say that by March, I had done so much work. I produced 3 animations and made 3 finished books of the prints that came from those animations. I had a newsprint mock-up of that will go alongside the exhibition, or my planned or imagined exhibition, just to add information and give more to the conversation of my thesis. And I was devastated for a while. I really felt crushed to not be able to execute what I had imagined. And it took a minute to really value, like, actually, let's backtrack, like the work that I did was so much, and it was really well done. And I feel really proud of what I was able to achieve in the time that I had in the studio, because I hadn't lost studio access, which meant I couldn't print or pretty much do anything. And it was weird. I feel like whenever classes resumed, I was over it. I felt like I just needed to graduate. But at the same time, it felt like I was just sad about it, not to be able to curate my own show. But I feel like I just needed to grieve that, and then imagine how the, you know, life takes you, and I'm sure I will get other opportunities to do so. But in overall, I just, it took me a while, but I feel really proud of what I was able to accomplish in my last year, even with the limitations and how like crushing it was to not be able to fulfill the things that I wanted to fulfill. But I felt like at the end I was able to produce a video, you know, a 10-minute video of the work that I did. It's filmed really beautifully by Ruben Garcia Marrufo, who helped me out and edited it as well. And I feel like if, you know, I wouldn't have had that as documentation if there was other circumstances. So that's something that came up out of the pandemic and doing thesis. And I'm really pleased with that video. It took me some time to, you know, get it together, but I feel really proud of that.
You should. I mean, I've seen the video. I've talked about your thesis work in my thesis class. I think that the concepts that you are introducing and like investigating are very timely still.
Yes.
I wonder, do you ever think about revisiting it perhaps in a post-pandemic world?
I do. I went into my thesis thinking of it as a long-term project where there will be many process, mostly because it is so nuanced and so complex. You know, looking at Spanish language and how violent it is, how gendered it is, and how just violent it is to a person in general, and just investigating that through my own experiences, my lived experiences, and the conversation I was having with my inner circle and the conversation I was having within the multiple digital spheres I inhabit. And I do think of revisiting it at some point. I think at the moment it's just like I needed a break. I felt really burnt out of it. Also, there was like some unresolved memories that came about through this investigation that were really hard to process while making the work. In a lot of ways, this work is very personal, even though I might not always state it as such. So it was like I felt in that period of like quarantine, I felt completely burned out, like emotionally, and like I was burned out from the academic rigor that I was having and really pushing myself through it. But yeah, I think I have flirted with the idea of revisiting it. I think, you know, I'll get to that when I decide to get to it, I guess. It's just, I think I still need some separation and time from it, but I look at the work and I'm very proud of it. I look at it and sometimes I'm like, I should really return when I'm ready to return to it and see what happens, you know, maybe it might be a collaboration or something else, but it's in the future at some point to revisit it.
You mentioned, you know, burnout. You mentioned how deeply personal this work is. As an artist who does work that can be at times very, very personal and very kind of heavy, I found that I have to have side projects that are a little bit more light, a little bit more fun. Do you have things like that you do when you need to detox a little bit from like your main sort of through way of work?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like a lot of the time when I was in the studio, what was pulling me away from the work might have been like an interpersonal reaction or conversation with someone else in the studio, or even just kind of just talking, you know. I feel like I was like a chatty Cathy in the studio. Sometimes I was really focused and I saw people and got distracted. And I feel like those were the moments that really pulled me away from being so like tunnel vision and so heavy, and that community aspect of being in a shared studio where you know the people that come and go and you know what they're doing and you kind of get acquainted with them in this particular way. It felt like it was a great environment to be in. I think if I had done this work alone, I think it would have been very different. I wouldn't say the work will be different, but I think I would be feeling very differently about it. And, you know, having like friendship support and like support systems around me was great. I think I got home and just like watched movies. I think I was not working on anything else. I think I was somewhat writing and just doing personal reflections. I don't really remember. It just feels like a bit of a blur that year, quite frankly. And at the moment, I'm not doing a lot of artists. I don't have a lot of my artist hat on. I mostly get home and enjoy TV. Just very pleasant. It's great. And I'm slowly getting back into writing and personal reflections, which is nice. But I think really having that community aspect of a shared studio is what helped me have a sense of self outside of the project and have some lightness around the heavy of it.
Yeah, it's important.
Yes.
So you have been kind of out of the school environment for a little bit of time now, and I feel like you really kind of hit the ground running. You did this residency with formerly C3 Initiative, a letterpress residency, now known as Stilo at Camp Colton. What was that like?
Oh, you know, it was, I had received the news, I think in August or so, and it felt really exciting. It felt just something to kind of look forward to. It kind of got delayed multiple times due to everything going on. And I was able to go this February, which was so lovely. It's the residency, the letterpress residency is in Camp Colton. The studio is in a beautiful barn in the middle of the forest. I mean, just the environment that they curated is really lovely. And, you know, like I had talked, it's my first residency actually. And I had talked to friends who had gone to residencies, what to expect, how to best go about it. And they said, you know, just go with a fresh mind and be in the spirit of printing. And it very much felt like that. I feel like I had some internal hiccups of, do I feel like I deserve this? And then I was like, no, what am I talking about? Like, I deserve to be here. And then it just felt like I was pushing through and just enjoying letterpress. I feel like I had a lot of lovely reflections with Rory Sparks, who manages the residency, and she was present for a lot of the days I was there. And she's been an instructor, she's been a mentor to me and a friend now, and it was just very lovely to share that space and just talk about letterpress and, you know, how to go beyond its traditional methods and how to think outside the box in terms of printing. And so I really enjoy the tools that I was just all over the place. I was printing so much. I think I did a stack of postcards. You'll have to excuse me, I don't have proper documentation for this, so I'll just have to show you. And it's using a circle furniture. Furniture is the, how do you explain this? The wooden objects that hold the type together. And I was like, you know, reflecting on what letterpress is very much straight lines and squares and rectangles. And looking at how you can break away from that, I was like, circles is a perfect way to break away, and curves and more organic shapes. So how do you make a circle with letterpress? Using straight lines. And I just dove into a hole of enjoying very much how to do that. And I believe the group show of the letterpress residency is coming up in November. I think they have yet to announce it, but I'm excited to see the cohort. You know, I haven't been able to meet them in person. And I feel like that's something that I really wish I had been able to experience in a residency, just be able to meet and converse with your cohort and enjoy their presence and what they, you know, bring to the table and whatever else. So I enjoyed my 2 weeks at Camp Colton. I think it was a very lovely way to break away from my, you know, the daily life. And yeah, it felt really validating as a person who just graduated. And you know, when the pandemic happened and I graduated, I was like, expect nothing, just drop all expectations, see what happens. And you know, through the connections that I made at PNCA, so many folks were so kind to keep me in mind. I was able to TA for Rory Sparks in her letterpress and book class, and a TA for Sarah Seastream for her theory and practice class, which was a great experience. And it was great. And they thought of me, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, residencies are just magical, really. They're the only time that you have to just dedicate entirely to your practice without the sort of everyday mundane things sort of seeping in. But yeah, imposter syndrome is real. I get that. Just know that everyone else is feeling the same. That usually helps me. So.
It does. Rory reminded me, and she was also like, "You deserve to be here," and I was like, "Of course I do, yeah." And then I got over it, and it was great. I enjoyed myself in that residency.
So you are, for all intents and purposes, you're like you're a real printmaker, like in every sense of the word. You're making other people's prints, which is what a printmaker traditionally is. Do you want to talk a little bit about that experience and like being in that world professionally?
Absolutely. So I think, when was it? Maybe November or late last year, there was word from the print department at PNCA that Melanie Printing, a fine art publishing company, was looking for an apprenticeship for it's like a 6-month program, pretty much very submersive of the print world. And I looked at it, and everything about it seemed very challenging. I felt challenged, even kind of. I was like, should I even apply? And I knocked on the door, and I received the undergrowth print education fund, which was like 6-month contract, 4 days a week to just learn printmaking and be with them and how, you know, they run their business and what do they do. And within 3 months, they asked me if I wanted to be part of their team, which has been really exciting. And as of July, I have been a printer assistant with them. And it's been like an eye-opening into the world of print. Of course, you learn very technical aspects of it in school, but you don't learn maybe the business side, or how galleries, curators, you know, people from museum work and function in that realm, because it's so niche. And it has been really great seeing like, oh, I'm interested in this, I'm not interested in that sort of situation, like being very reflective and very thankful that Harry and Paul, who are co-owners of Melanie Printing, having great mentors and very, very lovely to invite me in to know more of the behind the scenes of what, you know, a business like this, how do they function and what do they do. But it's been just like every day I get to the studio, I might be tired, but it's been very validating I do love what I'm doing. And this is something that I want to continue either with Melanie Printing or on my own or wherever I end up. This is where I'm supposed to be. And it feels that has been like an honor and a privilege. And I just to do what you love every day. It's great. Even though my hands hurt and, you know, you get cuts and things happen and your clothes are ruined, and it's still like really great to be like, oh, I get home, I'm tired, but I have no complaints of doing it every day and learning about paper or just talking about paper, having like hour-long conversations about paper or like plates. Or I'm very new to photography and just learning it and the mistakes that I make and how intimidating can be, but also how like the 5 degree in difference in temperature can really affect the ferric or things like that, you know. And those are really, you know, niche conversations, but they're really interesting to me. And like I said, I really do enjoy what I'm doing, and I feel really lucky to have great mentors like Paul and Harry, and to be able to work with them and be part of their team now that they are establishing themselves in Portland. They started, they have a big location in San Francisco, and they've been running it for, actually, I'm not sure how many years, but many years it seems like. And as of last year in January, they moved to Portland. So it's been great to be invited to be part of their team.
You mentioned that, like, being kind of being in that world, you've had a chance to sort of figure out what it is you do like or you don't like. And I'm wondering, like, have you had the chance in sort of interacting with all of these different kinds of printmakers that no doubt have come through that studio? Have you seen printmakers whose careers you would like to model professionally?
That's a good question. I think we have worked with some incredible artists who don't necessarily, like, they have worked in print and have a solid base in print, but aren't often printmakers or don't consider themselves printmakers. I think a lot of the people that I might, follow in my Instagram or like my digital sphere, there's a few that I really look up to, and I'm really curious as to how they run, like the administrative admin side of their business, like Backbones Publishing, I think is the name, is by Claudia Torres. She's from Mexico City but lives in Berlin, and she works. What I've seen so far, she does short workshops, I think once a month. She invites artists to come in and she helps them execute whatever projects they have in mind in terms of publications. And she also does her own work. So I'm really interested in that dynamic of bringing in people and inviting them into the space and sharing this craft and the knowledge and the skills that you have with people who are interested and want to be part of that. So that's like that interpersonal and community building at the same time continuing to be able to do your work. And I'm interested in that, I think I would like to like reach out to her and have a conversation. Like, please let me know all your secrets, because I think I something about that model intrigues me. But I feel like there's still so much for me to learn at Melanie Printing, and I have plenty of time to do that, And I think from the top of my head, that's the one person I can think of who maybe later on in my life I would like to model after. Because it just seems like it aligns with my vision or what I have in mind with myself.
Well, and sorry to interrupt. I know we're getting close to the last 10 or so minutes of this event. So Professor Stevens, if there's any last question you had before we go into Q&A, I'm happy to hand things over. If we want to transition here, we can as well.
Yeah, I just have one final question. What are you working on now?
Oh my goodness. I think for the last couple times I've been in my studio, it has felt like I've been tending to just the organization of the studio and settling into what is the best mode of working. And simultaneously, I'm just sewing my pants. I like just like sewing things that I've left off. Like I should probably cuff those pants, or like just fix it up and add a button. And that has felt like just enough to slowly get back into making for my own. It's been kind of troublesome to get back in that mindset, quite frankly, mostly due to personal reasons and what we all have been living through, and also getting back from work and just being like, oh, like I just don't want to think about anything. And thankfully I do share studio space with one of my best friends. So sometimes Laura Camila Medina, who's right behind me, she's a wonderful artist and also PNCA alum. And it's just, like slowly getting back into the mode of making, slowly getting back even into reading. And I feel like at the moment I'm not in the mood of, doing anything but just slowly getting back into these things that I do enjoy, like sewing and reading. And you know, at the moment I am thinking about the work that I did for the residency, since the exhibition's coming up. And for a while I was like, I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna do that. And then I've sat down with myself. I'm like, I honestly don't think, if I'm being sincere with myself, I don't think I'm in the mood for, or the emotional space to do any of that. So it's just sitting with the work and seeing like, what can I realistically give and be genuine about it, and not have this like alter self be like, these are the expectations you have to meet, and no one has those besides me. So it's having like just these inner monologues of the things that I want to achieve. And it just seems like sewing and getting back into reading and tending to the space and cleaning it has been sufficient, and it's enough. And you know, I hope to get to back into drawing, but I'm not going to push it if it doesn't feel right.
It seems so important for all of us to like practice grace with ourselves while we're also in the midst of what is arguably a very difficult, stressful environment. One of the questions that came in, especially when you mentioned Claudia, is really around, you just have this like genuinely curious and generous spirit. And it seems interesting that your idea of what would be amazing is to really co-create or create spaces for other people to explore an art form that you really love, and a craft that is really deep family meaning, but also, you know, your professional kind of personality and around. Is that something that is really kind of a meaningful role to you?
Yes, I think, you know, when I think of printmaking and the ways that I've studied it and been investigating it, it has always been more than just the individual, which is also how I function as a person in my interpersonal connections. I really dislike the idea of like the lonely painter. I really do, because a lot of the painters were in groups. They had cohorts, they had conversations, they were informed by each other, and it's kind of bullshit. Excuse my French, but it's bullshit to sell the idea that these were individuals and genius of their own making, when they were actually informed by so much, and they did never accredit it. So for me, it's important, and it's just like a personal value that I have in how I build interpersonal connections and community of sharing. And, you know, like I like to share my food, just like I like to share like, oh, you're making a scene, like let's think about this together. Let me help you. Or I think of print as an extension of myself too. Like, how can you carry on a legacy that has continued to survive? And I think of my granddad a lot, who didn't really speak of his experience as a printer until I started studying it. And then he kind of just opened up like a book, and he was very pleased that someone had taken, you know, his role as well, and something that he loved and did for years. And I think sharing craft is important. It's just like joy. Sharing is if there's something you're passionate about, sharing it can be very joyous, and it feels so validating. And it just feels like invigorating also when you're not in the mood to make your own things. It can also be easier to just like, oh, bring in the project and we'll like talk about it. So I feel like it's another mode of making without just thinking of yourself. So yeah, that's my relationship to it.
That's really beautiful, and it really embodies that like supportive community space, but also creating a space that people feel welcome and included in. The other thing that had come up is really, you've managed to find an art form that lets you examine the context and the narratives in which you've lived, your family's lived, your cultural experiences, but then turn it into both a physical manifestation and a visual interpretation of those narratives, and challenge them at the same time, or bring others along with you in challenging them. Is that it? I mean, that seems like something that really excites you and kind of feeds into how you position yourself in this space.
Yes. Like I said, it's like I mean, I live in my head a lot, but I live amongst so many other people in the different spheres that I inhabit. And it's like, if I'm having this conversation with myself in my inner monologue, like who else is doing it, and how can I engage that person or people with that? And if I'm asking this question, someone else is also asking these questions. And I you know, it took me a minute to get there. I think I was just like doing the things, and then I looked back and I was like, oh, this is how my mode of making, interesting. And a lot of it has to do when I think of like my collegiate career, is that the conversations I was having with my friends about the work that they were doing, and the reflections I was having with the world and how we live, and how those very much informed how I was making and producing or just thinking about work. Um, like I said, it's like, you know, we're informed by everything, like our visual diet and the conversations that we have with people around us, or just reading. And to not invite them in just seems a little odd. just to give something back, you know, these are the things that I'm thinking about, you know, add to the conversation.
And move it forward at the same time, moving it forward, adding your own personal context, and then inviting people to bring their own to the table as well, which is really exciting. I know we're in the final few minutes, so Professor Stevens, Alejandra, if there's anything else that you want to share with the group before we sign off for the evening, I'm handing the floor back to you.
I just wanted to say thank you. This has been a lovely conversation. I'm excited for this Alumni Connection program. There's some really great alums that have come out of PNCA, and I hope to see them in this program.
Yeah, I would just like to again thank Alejandra for, you know, chatting with us and just being so generous about her work and her practice and her thought processes. It's been an honor talking with her. So, yeah.
It's really been a beautiful conversation. We thank you both for your time and just generosity in sharing your perspective and your experiences with us. And for those who are online with us, if you have suggestions for other alumni or people that we could bring along in this event space, please know we're absolutely open to that as well. And with that, in our final 2 minutes, I will just thank you both for your time, as well as Ivy and Michelle, who do a lot of the organizing around this event series and keep me on track and keep everything moving forward. And with that, for those who are in this space with us, thank you for joining us. We hope you stay healthy and safe. Find some grace for yourself in these really challenging, difficult times. And hopefully we'll see you online and in person when it is safe to do so in a future event. So thank you so much and have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evening.
You too. Take care, everybody.